Well, first of all, we want to welcome all of you here on this Thursday afternoon for this first dialogue in the Baylor Conversation series. Again, it's just a delight to see all of you here. We are delighted to have with us also the chairman of the Board of Regents, Mr. Joel Allison, also Baylor President Linda Livingstone, and our interim president, Dr. Michael McLendon. Before we begin, a quick introduction of each of them, although I don't know if they really need much introduction to all of us here in the Baylor family. But Mr. Allison is a graduate of Baylor University and also Trinity University. Just last February, he retired after more than 40 years in the healthcare industry. I think the last 2 decades, is that correct, with Baylor's Scott and White
Yes.
healthcare system. And he has served on the Baylor Board of Regents since 2012, and he has been chairman since June 1st of this year. Dr. Livingstone is a graduate of Oklahoma State University. She served on the Baylor business faculty from 1991 to 2002, including service during that time as Associate Dean of Graduate Programs. And she left Baylor for a short period of time, served as Dean of the business schools at Pepperdine and George Washington University. And on June 1st, she became the university's 15th president. And Dr. Michael McLendon is a graduate of Baylor, Florida State, and the University of Michigan. It can be an interesting weekend sometimes at your house during football season. He also was on the faculty and in academic leadership positions at Vanderbilt and at SMU before he returned to Baylor in 2015 as Dean of the School of Education and the Hale Endowed Professor in Higher Education Leadership and Policy. He began serving as interim president here at Baylor on July 1st. Thank you all so much for this time together to have a conversation about news of the day and also as Baylor moves forward. And let's begin, Dr. Livingstone, with you and look back at October 26th. Just a few weeks ago, that was your inauguration day. Describe what that day was like for you and what memory really will stay with you the longest.
Sure. And first, let me just thank all of you for being here and for taking the time out of your afternoon to join us in this conversation. It's a pleasure to have you with us. So as I reflect back on the inauguration, it has to be one of the most sort of moving and humbling experiences I think that I've personally experienced in my life. And I think there were a number of reasons for that, but I think part of it was because, we are working very hard to bring people together to kind of reinforce our mission and vision as an institution. And in many ways, that inauguration symbolized that because we had faculty and staff and students in the room together. We had representatives from academic institutions across the country and really, I think, around the world there. We had members of the community, both in Waco and further out, as well as members of the legislature. And so it was just, I think, very symbolic of kind of the care and love and concern and support for Baylor that we see in bringing that all together kind of in that particular event. So very special. In terms of sort of kind of most memorable part of it, well, I have to say that, having my husband Brad, who's with us today, and our daughter Shelby participate in that was very, very special. And I have to say, Shelby's introduction of me was probably for me the highlight of the whole day. She did such a lovely job, and as a mom, I'm obviously unbelievably proud of her stepping up and doing that. But it's interesting when I talk to people about the inauguration, everybody says, oh, it was really lovely. Oh my gosh, Shelby was amazing, and she really stole the show. And then they go, oh, and you were okay too. And so certainly as a mom, I'm very, very proud. Professionally, I know now never to have my daughter actually speak before me in an event ever again. So that was certainly very special.
Yeah, and you had your family there. And,
yes.
And what did you call them there, that whole group?
All the president's kin.
That's right, all the president's kin
is what they called themselves. Yes, I think that was my younger brother. That would be something he would have come up with.
And I know that was very special to have all of them there
very
too.
Special.
So thank you. Mr. Allison, you have worked with executives, so many executives throughout your time and your long career in the healthcare industry. What were some of the unique qualities that you saw in Dr. Livingstone that she could bring here to Baylor?
Thank you, Lori. And let me also say thank you to all of you for being here today. And most of all, thank you for what you do each and every day for Baylor University and for our students. we greatly appreciate you all, and we're thankful for this time to be with you. And Lori, I guess I go back to when we formed the search committee at the Board of Regents to ask a very diverse search committee to come together to select the next president for Baylor University. And they came up with a list of qualities and traits, criteria they were looking for in the next president for Baylor. And as we looked at those, and after we went through our process and had the interviews, Dr. Livingstone checked every box that we were looking for. And let me just first of all say what a pleasure and joy it's been to work with Dr. Livingstone since June 1 as our president, and it's really been great. One of the first things we put top priority when we were listing those qualities that Dr. Livingstone exhibits so well is, number one, we wanted a committed Christian, unashamedly Christian believer. We wanted someone that came from academics and, in your all's terms, had a terminal degree. Being in healthcare, terminal doesn't always. I'm worried about that a little bit, but I understand it now. I'm learning. So, but in all seriousness, that was something that we felt strongly about, and again, she checked the box. We wanted someone who understood how to run a complex organization with a significant operational budget. And again, Dr. Livingstone, in my mind, hit that requirement very well. We wanted someone, of course, high integrity, good experience. I wanted someone that knew Baylor, knew our values, knew how we operate, and the fact that she had been at Baylor and had been a part of the faculty and in the academic world, I thought was another great opportunity for us as well. I wanted someone that really understood the role of a board. In fact, that was one of the questions I asked Dr. Livingstone. I said, what's your view of the role of the chairman of the board and the CEO in that relationship? Because most organizations, that is one of the most important relationships. And she hit the nail on the head, answered it right on. And then I think also that I saw was the fact that she's a very humble person. She's very approachable. And I think that's what leaders need today. And she's a great communicator. And I guess one of the things I put a high value on that Dr. Livingstone exhibited to me and to the search committee is the fact she's authentic. And I think that is something that's very valued. So I've worked with some great CEOs. I've been on boards, chaired boards with CEOs, been a CEO. There's no question that Dr. Livingstone has the quality that every great leader would want to have. So again, I was just pleased. And it didn't hurt that she played in the Big 12. And even though it was for OSU, she still played in the Big 12. As she once said, they said, how are you going to handle all those men presidents in the Big 12? And she said, well, I will just say I am the only one of them that ever played in the Big 12. So I felt very comfortable about that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Allison. Dr. McLendon, inaugurations are very special and meaningful in the life of a university. I mean, what does it truly mean, though, especially you as a scholar in higher education? What do inaugurations mean, and how special is it actually to the life of Baylor University?
Well, let me simply add my thanks to that which has come before. I count several hundred of our faculty colleagues here today, and thank you all very much for coming out to this conversation. Presidential inaugurations aren't merely ceremonial, although that's important in and of itself. They do have a lot of symbolic and also substantive importance in the life of the institution. Just a couple of weeks ago at our inauguration, we saw, I think, and particularly from the perspective, the vantage point of faculty, several important symbolic messaging that was there as the president and I and her team worked on the inauguration planning over the course of the summer and into the fall. It was very important to President Livingstone that we would have a series of academic panels, for example, and that those panels would focus on excellence in our education here at Baylor, and that those would be not individuals brought from the outside, however distinguished such a person might be, but that it would focus on the work that our faculty here are doing at Baylor. And in fact had 8 faculty involved in 2 panels, one on, for those of you who were able to attend some of these 2 panels, one focused on human flourishing and different aspects of work that ones of you are doing around human flourishing. And the second panel was that of cancer and cancer research and what Baylor faculty, some faculty are doing here around issues of cancer research and treatment and remedy. And those were two very powerful events, powerful symbolically because they emphasized President Livingstone's commitment to Baylor's academic mission, to research and to scholarship at the highest level, and also to it being our own faculty having an important voice and being on display throughout the inauguration week. There are also several important substantive aspects to inauguration itself, and those of you who heard either in person or by tape perhaps President Livingstone's inauguration address heard what in fact she cares about. We heard these themes that I've listened to and I've heard a great deal about since I joined her team at the end of June. Ones of you all have heard this in a variety of settings over the past 5 to 6 months. They are continued commitment to our Christian faith and to the faith commitment of Baylor University, to that portion in Pro Futurist that speaks of the world needing a research university that is unambiguously Christian. We also heard in that inauguration address a deep commitment as well to excellence in teaching, and third, also a commitment to undergraduate education. And because it's Baylor, we don't simply aspire to any kind of strong undergraduate educational experience. We have to use the term transformative or transformational educational experience for undergraduates. So this is a high bar that we set for ourselves, and the President signaled all of that and our continued importance to those firm commitments of ours over time. But also she indicated one other thing, and I don't know if you all, you might have missed it. She said something about research and scholarship, and I think Tier 1 as well. And there were deans who wrote to me and faculty colleagues who came up in the moments immediately following the inauguration address. I'm looking at one of them right now who said, my goodness, I've never heard senior leadership of the institution speak as forcefully or passionately about our research and our scholarship and our commitment thereto as this president did during her inauguration speech. So I think we can learn a great deal and take important signs from both the symbolic and substantive aspects of an inauguration. And I'm very proud of the one that our president gave.
All right, and some
In
of those
fact, that
things
little
we'll
brother
talk
of
a little
mine
bit
I was
more.
telling you about that came up with all the president's kids after the speech, because he had not heard it before, he said, gosh, I guess you guys want to do like Tier 1 research at Baylor,
maybe.
right? Yeah, we do. So he got it too. So.
And the inaugural address, both in print and on the web, is on the President's website if you have not been able to see that. Also, both symposia, I believe, are on your website, the
Correct.
Provost
Thank you.
website. And so definitely worth the opportunity to sit down and watch if you have not had the opportunity to do so yet. Also, this is a conversation here that we're having, but also we will have time for Q&A. As well towards the end of the program, so wanted to make sure that you were aware of that will be another part of the conversation here. Dr. Livingstone, let's focus a little bit more on the news of the day. We've had a couple of big dominoes that have fallen in the past couple of weeks. The SAC COC on-site review and also the external review of the 105 recommendations by Cashion O'Connor. How significant were those two developments, and what might be the next domino to fall?
Yeah, both of those were really significant for us, given obviously what's happened over the last 1.5 to 2 years here at the university. And so first of that was the SAC COC visit team that was on campus, and we shared that report with you. And they had reviewed 3 standards that they had said we were not in compliance with, and that we had to bring those into compliance. And so on their visit, they met with, I think, over 100 folks while they were on campus, did a very thorough review. In addition to that, Wes Knoll and his staff did a tremendous job putting together a very comprehensive report in response to the issues that they raised. And their recommendation to the Commission on Colleges is that that warning be lifted. That, of course, is just a recommendation. Early December, the Commission on Colleges will meet in Dallas at their annual meeting, and we are cautiously optimistic that the commission will actually lift that sanction. So that domino's kind of halfway down. It's not quite all the way down yet, but we hope that that will happen soon. So that was very affirming. We think any external affirmation of the things that we're doing, we think is important. Obviously, the other was the external audit of the 105 recommendations that was done by Cashion O'Connor, and they affirmed that we had completed implementation of those 105. So again, very important. That audit was shared with the SAC COC committee. That audit has been shared with the Big 12. That audit was shared publicly just about a week ago, so anybody that wants to read through that can see it. We think that's important, certainly for indicating that we have completed what we started out to do and said we were going to do, but for a couple of other reasons. One, we think it's a wonderful blueprint for other institutions to follow. They could look at that audit and they can know what the law says, they can know the things we've done, they can know the kinds of things they should be looking at to ensure that they're doing everything they can as we are to try to prevent sexual assault and sexual violence on our campuses. So I think that's very, very critical for us. I would say, I know we had hundreds of faculty and staff across campus that worked on those 105 recommendations, and so thank you to those in the room that were a part of that. That was unbelievably heavy lifting, hard work, difficult issues to deal with, and we would not have gotten to where we are without tremendous commitment from so many across this campus. I do think it's important to remember that many of the aspects of that report aren't things you check the box and you're done doing. They are commitments we have to make every single day to continue to reinforce the culture that we want to prevent sexual violence and to support those that experience it, whether on or off our campus, that are a part of our community, really forever. And we have to continue to learn, we have to continue to adapt and change. So you're sort of never done with that, and so I think that's important. Next domino to fall, most likely, and it's a little hard to predict, most likely it will be our work with the Big 12. I was at the Big 12 meeting on Monday, provided an update to the Big 12 board about that. They have a task force of 3 presidents, the chancellor at TCU, the president of Oklahoma State, and the president at West Virginia, that are sort of a task force that are reviewing the work that we've done to determine whether they feel like we have fully completed that and that it's embedded kind of fully and sustainably in our culture. They have a couple of outside experts that are going to be doing part of that, kind of a sort of a second tier of audit beyond the audit we've done. So they've been on campus once, they will be back probably a couple more times. So we hope that by the February board meeting of the Big 12, they will have gone through that process and be able to kind of reach a conclusion that we hope affirms what we've heard from several other external bodies.
All right, thank you. And also, Dr. Livingstone, and we open up the paper usually just about every day. It feels there's some new news story. Can you give us an update on the legal front?
Sure.
And you know, when we might have lawsuits resolved?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we've certainly been through the process of resolving a number of the cases that are out there against us. And what we're trying to do in each of those situations is work with the survivors of those situations to find a resolution that helps them bring healing and bring resolution for them. And so for some people that has been settlements, and we have done that in a number of different cases. For others it could ultimately be taking those through the court system. We have 2 court dates set, one next late summer of 2018, one in early 2019. There are currently 5 active Title IX cases still out there that we haven't resolved. We are certainly continuing to work on those very, very carefully. And the one that you read the most about is what's being called Jane Doe's 1 through 10. That one has gotten the most attention in the press because it's raising some interesting legal questions and issues. And I'm certainly not a lawyer, so I will give you just sort of the amateur's take on that. One of the really important questions that's gotten a lot of attention recently is the request from the plaintiff's attorneys to get information from our educational files, our counseling and health records, Title IX records of students who are not a party to the case, either as the complainants or the respondents. And so we feel very strongly that the privacy of our other students that are not a party to the case should be protected. And so we are doing everything we can to try to do that. So we've actually filed some things up with the Fifth Circuit that could help resolve that sooner rather than later. So that one we will continue to see some of those issues because there's some interesting legal questions there that frankly have not only implications for us but for every university across the country in these kinds of cases. So broadly, we think probably the legal cases, it'll be probably 18 to 24 months depending on how those are ultimately resolved and how many of them actually move into the court system rather than some other type of resolution.
And Mr. Allison, prior to Dr. Livingstone's arrival, it seemed like the Board of Regents was in the news quite often. Not so much now. What has changed?
Well, one, one of my goals is not to be in the news as a region. That's one thing, but seriously, it's been I think, to support what Dr. Livingstone said about our commitment has been to get through these external reviews, to continue to support administration, Dr. Livingstone, in completing these. And one of our top priorities for the last 18 months was to implement the Pepper Hamilton, or calls it O'Connor now, 105 recommendations. And as you've seen, that has been taken care of. The second was to be sure we got through SAC COC, supporting Dr. Livingstone and the staff. And I again want to applaud all the work that was done on that. Wes Null and the team did a great job with Dr. Livingstone's leadership. And then continually, as a board of regents, we set in June with Dr. Livingstone's concurrence, and that I wanted to see us do two things as priorities. Number one, restore trust in the Board of Regents, because I think that was a concern and had been damaged. Number two was to unify the Baylor family. And I think those are very important priorities for us as we move forward, and hopefully as we've tried to be very open and have better communications, that's causing it to really, I think, maybe not see the Board of Regents in the paper and in a negative way. I told someone the other day, I said, I thought healthcare was one of the most highly regulated industries in the country, but I'm beginning to believe universities are high with all these external reviews. So a priority for us is to continue to get through those, as Dr. Livingstone said, finish and in some way get resolved the litigation so that we can move forward. And the other thing that we've done, and many of you have already been aware of this, is that we did appoint a governance review task force, so that we know that we can be a better functioning board, a high-performing board, and to make necessary changes and to be able to communicate. So we have been working to implement those recommendations that came forward, and we started in July with our first meeting to implement those. There was probably 30-plus recommendations. Y'all may be familiar with the Governance Review Task Force that was appointed. 3 non-regents, 3 regents, and the chair was a non-regent, which was good. And these were very, very successful men and women that had a great experience in board leadership. In July, we had at our retreat people from the Association of Governing Boards come in and work with us on best practices. We have been implementing those changes. One of the things we wanted to do was to have better communication among the board members. We have 41 voting members now. And there's one ex officio, which is we have 2 students, one's voting, one's ex officio. We have 2 faculty members, as you know, that are now regents. So again, we want to make sure everybody, and one of our changes was that all committees, we went from 6 to 8 committees, every regent can attend the committee meetings. We set it up so that they don't run concurrently. We had to go an extra day, so we have 1 committee on Wednesday morning, 1 in the afternoon, same thing, or 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, same thing on Thursday, and then the full board on Friday. So every region, anytime we have a call, we had our monthly executive committee call yesterday. Any region can join that call, so that there's a sense that this is a very engaged. We want openness, good candid conversation, debate, and come to good decisions. The other thing that I asked, and it was approved by Dr. Livingstone and by the board, is that we put forward 4 non-negotiables on how we'll move forward as a board to make decisions. Those 4 non-negotiables are, number 1, we make this decision, will it keep Baylor a Christ-centered university? Number 1. Number 2, if we make this decision, will it stay true to the mission of Baylor University? Number 3, if we make this decision, will it reflect the principles and the core convictions of Baylor University? And then number 4, if we make this decision, are we doing it doing the right thing for the right reason? And I believe if we take that screen at the committees and at the board level, and we can say yes, 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 most likely we'll make a good decision. And so that's the goal, that's the commitment, restore that trust, unify the Baylor family. When I was a student here, I didn't even know we had regents. I'd like to go back to that. All I knew was President McCall, and all I knew was he didn't want to see me and I didn't want to see him.
Thank you very much for the candor, also for your leadership and the open communication. Appreciate it, Mr. Allison. Dr. McLendon, in the midst of all these headlines over the past 18 months, our faculty still teaching, our faculty still conducting research, students' lives are still being transformed. How has the academic enterprise been able to maintain its focus? And also, what kind of impact has there been on the university's academic reputation?
How do we maintain focus? When and I've shared this with a number of you individually, when President Livingstone asked if I would serve in this capacity, in this role, she said to me, and I hope you don't mind my sharing this, we did not discuss this, nor do I have permission, Linda. She said, don't take this as an offense, Michael. Don't take it as an insult, but would you be willing to serve as interim provost? And I said, why would I take that as an insult? And she said, well, you know, it's about the toughest job in higher education, it seems. And I said, well, it's especially tough job here at Baylor, being provost. And I said, but what would we actually do every day? What would we get to do? And she said, well, we have a couple of really big, important milestones, in fact, ahead of us. One of them is that we need to develop an academic strategic plan. We've never done that before in the history of the university. We have the soaring, ambitious, pro-futurist vision, but we have not had a strategic plan as to how precisely we would put that vision into effect, particularly as we look ahead to our future. And secondly, we have the prospect of a capital campaign, a comprehensive campaign. So the notion of raising money to help sustain us into the future and to make choices of a strategic nature and of high consequence about how and in what areas we will build academically at Baylor. Those are the two primary things we have to do this year. And I said, well, yes, absolutely, I accept this, and this will be a great year ahead of us. So we've maintained focus a great deal by looking to the future. And we've also maintained focus by reminding ourselves of what Baylor faculty and what this community does well. You all, our faculty, show up and teach students daily and do so well and passionately. And we conduct scholarship and we serve our communities and the world and the church. So in some respects, we've continued to do that which we've done well historically, but we also have had several significant new milestone challenges presented to us and on which many of us here have been working over the past 5 months. That's how we maintain focus. Our brand remains strong. We have continued to recruit the faculty that we want to have here at Baylor, and our early indications are that we'll have another very strong year of faculty recruitment. Our student admissions applications dipped some in the early fall, in part because of the, we believe, weather-related events, the hurricane and other things along the Gulf Coast. But those have now recovered as well. And of course, this last year was the strongest year in our history in terms of applications. So this is something we monitor very closely. We pay very close attention to this and all the ways in which we think that brand and admissions and student interest and faculty interest and also academic quality might be impacted in any way, the events of these past several years. And we see no real strong indication of that. In fact, we see the university continuing to move ahead, and we expect that'll be the case.
We'll talk more about the academic strategic plan and Tier 1 research university status in just a few minutes. But Dr. Livingstone, I know you've traveled recently to Washington, D.C., and there's been a lot of talk about changes to federal guidance with Title IX. How, if anything, is changed or updated? Will that change how Baylor looks at it in any way?
So currently, we've made no changes to our policies or procedures or processes based on the kind of changed guidance at the federal level at this point in time. And what I would say is, even if you look at the 105 recommendations, probably of the 105, maybe 40-ish were actually required by law, either state or federal law. Many of them were just good practices or best practices for what you should be doing on a campus or in any kind of organization to ensure the safety and health and well-being of your students on your campus. And so, kind of regardless of what the federal government chooses to do at some point, we are going to do what we know we need to do based on what we've learned, based on what we learned from other institutions, to ensure that we're doing everything we can to provide for the safety and health of our students. Certainly if federal guidelines change in a way that we have to adapt what we're doing, we will ensure that what we're doing is in compliance with federal guidelines or state guidelines. But currently we have not made any changes in that regard. The other thing I would say Gina Smith and Leslie Gomez, who are our two attorneys that were the Pepper Hamilton attorneys that are now the Cozen O'Connor attorneys, and they developed the 105 recommendations. They're actually two of the most highly regarded lawyers in the country on any of these Title IX issues at the campus level, and they're actually consulting with the Department of Education on some of these Title IX issues. And so when you have people like that we actually know this very well and understand what you need to do to protect students, but also understand some of the complexities of higher education, you know, we're hopeful that as this goes forward, if there are any changes, they will be ones that will be good and positive for all of the parties that are involved.
Thank you, Dr. Livingstone. Appreciate all of those updates, and we'll focus a little bit more on moving forward now. And we'll begin with you, Mr. Allison. You alluded to some of these things on behalf of the board just a few moments ago, but can you characterize the current sentiment of the board right now, and what has Baylor, especially the board, what has the board learned from the past 18 months?
Well, I think what the board has learned is that we can do a lot better in board responsibilities. And that was one of the things we took forward this past summer. I was talking about the role of the board. What is the role of the board in any high-performing organization? And that is to understand that the board has a role, management has a role, and there's a bright line between those. And so that was part of our process in order to improve our overall operations just as a board based on what I shared earlier with these governance review task force recommendations. And basically we sat down and talked about that. It was approved by the board, the roles, how we will function. We want, again, to recognize that the board has one major responsibility, and we need to clearly understand that, it's to hire and fire the president. But other than that, we have basically three roles, and we've basically stated that each time. Number one, our role is to provide fiduciary oversight. That's what we call oversight, fiduciary, looking at the budget, making sure the trains are running on time, it's operational, and holding Dr. Livingstone accountable for that. Number two is to do strategic oversight, and that's what I call foresight. And you'll hear more about that when we talk about the academic strategic plan. And the board does adopt the strategy recommended by management, adopts the budget to align with that strategy recommended by management. And the third thing is to provide foresight, what I call integrative, to where we spend a lot of time talking about the future and major aspects of education issues that are out in the world today, looking futuristically. And so trying to keep the board in our lanes. Dr. Livingstone talked about that, keeping management in their lanes. There's a clear role there. And I think that's helped us, and more communication. We also did a lot of discussion about the difference between transparency and confidentiality. And I think one of the things we learned is that we weren't communicating well. People felt like we had become almost secretive, and that there were just a few folks that were in the inside running the board. We wanted to change that completely. And as you see, there's much more transparency. We do the press conference together after the board meetings. We put out a letter, and we're trying to do that. One of the things we've also done that I think will be very helpful with the board and their role, working with Dr. Livingstone and management, is we hired a board professional, which was something that was a recommendation. And we have a very qualified, talented individual. Her name is Christy Orr, will be joining us December 3rd. She's at UT today doing a very similar role with the University of Texas, so she has great experience. And she will be a communication link between the board, Dr. Livingstone, and management, and for me. And that's going to help us be more efficient and to be more effective as a board, and again, do what a board's supposed to do. And I think that's going to be part of the lessons we learned. And I feel good. It's a very, I would say, collegial board. We have a lot of dialogue. Like I said, we do updates and keeping everybody informed. And so I've seen a lot of progress. Our committees we've shortened the meetings so that they have to be at the high level, working on priorities. I'm one of those that likes to keep people on the board out of the weeds. We don't need to be in the weeds. We need to be at the high level. And the shortness of the meetings on the committees to get all these in has helped really focus on what's most important. And then that makes the board meeting much more effective on Friday. So again, I feel very good about where the board is. And we've got good people, good men and women who are so passionate and committed to the mission of Baylor. And that's what I've appreciated about having the privilege and honor to work with such a wonderful group of men and women. So I feel good about where we are.
And Mr. Allison, you also talk about unifying the Baylor family.
Yes.
That's very important to you,
Yes.
very important to all of us.
To provide guidance to the strategy. And a lot of us have asked, well, what's our strategy? Because we've just been so reactionary. And what Linda and Michael have explained gets us all excited. I'm very excited about it. And the board's role is, as you heard, in February, we'll see the first draft of the plan and have dialogue and input. And then in May, hopefully, they'd bring it to us for approval. And so we approve that, as well as the budget to go along with the strategic plan. And I have a great deal of enthusiasm and optimism about this, because I think it's another way to unify the Baylor family, Lori. Because if we go into the big campaign, that's a great potential for us to unify the Baylor family and bring people around. And what you've heard Linda and Michael talk about, a bold vision and a strategic plan to go along with that bold vision. To me, that's exciting. And I think the board's, we had a wonderful work session this last month at the board meeting on Wednesday night, when you had the board members with the deans. And that, many of our board members commented, that was one of the best board meetings we've had. And that was a great experience to hear the ideas, the thoughts, and to start having that dialogue. So I feel the board's got a very important role, and that is to approve and to align the budget and the strategic plan as presented by management, and then to work every way we can with Linda and Michael and the team to make it a reality. It is, for me, I love big, bold visions, and I get really excited when I hear Linda talk about her vision, and particularly around what I also completely agree with her. There is a unique role for Baylor University in this world today. And I don't believe there is another university that can fill that role that we need so desperately in this world, as a distinctively Christian university that still offers academic excellence integrated with a Christian commitment. That's very, I believe, unique. And again, I'm a layperson, but I get excited when I hear what these two people tell us and express about where this university can be 10 years from now. And I'm looking forward to watching it happen with their guidance and leadership.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you all for the candid conversation here. We will have Q&A here in just a few minutes. I believe that Michelle Berry and Robin Driscoll will have the microphone. Do you have any parting words before we begin the Q&A? While we'll let you go ahead and do that, then we'll explain about the Q&A here in just a few minutes. Any final thoughts or anything before we get into the Q&A, or are you ready to get right into that?
The one thing I would add that, and it kind of goes with what Joel was just talking about, I was really optimistic about coming back to Baylor, even in spite of all that had happened over the last year and a half or 2 years when I was offered the position. But since I've come back and been around our people on campus, off campus, I'm even more optimistic now. Part of that is because I've seen such good alignment from students, faculty, staff, administration, the board, the people out in the community that I meet with, parents, alumni, friends. Really wonderful alignment, as Joel said earlier, around love for Baylor and care and concern for Baylor and wanting to see Baylor move forward, but also around this vision and direction that we're going. And so when you have alignment across all of those groups in a very significant way around a really bold vision after a very difficult stretch for the university, I think that just sets us up to be unbelievably successful as we go forward. And it's just a really wonderful time for us, I think, as we look forward to take advantage of that and build on it and really advance the university in very significant ways in the coming years.
All right, we are grateful to you, Dr. Livingstone, Mr. Allison. Dr. McLendon as well. We will take questions from you in the audience. If you do have a question, if you will do us a favor and raise your hand, and we'll bring the microphone to you. And if you will also do us a favor and identify yourself, tell us your name and the academic department that, or any department that you do represent. So are there any questions? And we've got Michelle Berry and Robin Driscoll who do have the microphone, and we would.
And Brad, you can't answer any questions back there.
You can answer,
No
yes.
questions from Brad.
No.
We've got a question here.
So this question is a follow-up to the R1 and Tier 1. And I think I'll direct this to Mr. Allison. First of all, this is the best news I've heard since I've been here of going to R1 and Tier 1. I think if you poll the faculty, they're going to say exactly the same thing. This is what we want to do. My question might sound a bit condescending, and I don't mean it to be. Believe me, I'm not that kind of guy. Okay? But does the Board of Regents, do they fully understand the cost of getting us to R1 and Tier 1?
I appreciate the question, and I think it's very, very important and relevant. And I think the board's getting a better understanding because it's coming from these two people who do understand it, and they are informing us about what it's going to take. And that's why we're trying to get this campaign geared up so that we can support it financially with their vision of being a Tier 1 research university, because it is not cheap. Michael's convinced me of that, no doubt. But that's okay. That's okay. But it will get people excited, and we can get. Dave Roselli's not here. Dave's on the hot seat. But I believe truly that we can get those transformative gifts that will transform us to that Tier 1 if we have this vision and we can articulate it. People will give when we articulate what it is that gets them excited, and that we're excited and the leadership is excited. And when you have someone that can communicate that, if you'd asked me a year ago what is Tier 1 research, I really wouldn't know, quite frankly. But since Michael and Linda have been educating the board, I understand it, and it gets you excited. But it's not going to be easy unless we can align this and get people to, make the donations and make those gifts, because that's how we'll get there. That's the way it happens.
One of the things I would say that we've learned, we've been doing some data gathering with our highest end potential donors that we think would be the ones that are going to make the difference in the campaign. And one of the things that we've learned is we love to talk R1 and Tier 1 here and talk academic language here. We have to be really careful what language we use when we tell this story with donors, because they aren't academics, and that doesn't mean as much to them. So one of the things we are working very hard on, the deans are being very, very helpful, is couching this as we build out a campaign and the initiatives on impact. What is the impact of doing this going to be? How is it going to change lives? How is it going to change society? How is it going to make a difference if we do this kind of research? So you may hear us use some language internally that's very academic and Tier 1-ish, R1-ish. You may hear us use a little bit different framing when we talk to donors and the sort of non-academic community. And at the core, it will all be about the same thing, but it will be in language that is more meaningful to different audiences. So understand that as some of this rolls out. But you also can also be very helpful to us in helping to frame some of these things in ways that donors who aren't academics will understand why that research matters, or this project matters, or that initiative is going to make a difference. So.
Lance, thank you. Lance, thank you very much for your question. Also, the affirmation. You can see why I come back and report to deans and faculty and department chairs the great enthusiasm I feel in part because of the chairman's and the regent's support for us and what we're doing, and also President Livingstone's willingness to delegate a great deal to us in both in having constructed this sort of the structure and the academic planning process, and also working at grassroots levels to identify specific initiatives we want to build that we think will be the route by which we're able to build our research sufficient to begin to approximate levels of Tier 1-ness. There are not only, Lance, things that we need to look to donors and to extramural funders and others to provide us so that we can have the financial capacity we need to achieve Tier 1. There are also things we have to do internally as well, and I want to take this moment just to reiterate that. You all will recall that in recent days there was an important announcement, which was the appointment of Professor Gary Carini of our Hankamer School of Business to hold the position as our first Vice Provost for Graduate Professional Education. And Gary's role here is to build high-quality, larger enrollment master's and professional doctorate populations, where our responsibility is not to provide fully for to provide financially fully for those students to attend here to take their professional graduate degrees, but rather that they would have some contribution to their own education. In other words, that this becomes something we do not only because we care about the professions, not only because we care about preparing and continuing to prepare some of the best teachers and educators and lawyers and social workers and other professionals anywhere in the country, and especially here in Texas, but also because with growing enrollment of high-quality graduate professional students, that helps generate tuition revenue. And that tuition revenue we're going to use as cash in hand that we then reallocate internally to building up our PhD programs and having the cash that we need to build some of the new academic initiatives that we're talking about. Much of the financial support for that which we seek to do over the coming 5 years needs to come from donors. It needs to come from granting agencies, extramural research. But much of it we'll need to create on our own by being more entrepreneurial in building high-quality masters and other professional student populations. And that reallocation of revenue internally is going to be a key part of our ability to fund our aspirations. Thank you.
All right. Are there other questions? Make sure I don't miss. Got it? Joanne?
Hi, I'm Joanne Spitz, and I'm in University Development, and I am so excited to hear this. I really appreciate you coming today. But I just wondered, I'm fairly new to Baylor, and I'm wondering what the pulse is as you go out and meet with the faculty and the staff, people who've been here for 20, 30 years. Is everyone on board? Is everyone excited? Or if not, how can you get them to share your enthusiasm?
Do you want to take that since you've done most of that work?
There's tremendous support. I think of the 50 or so department chairs with whom I spoke, the one element that seemed unsure to them was just what the dean mentioned to me back very early on in the process. We've not done this before, and what really do you have in mind, and how will we know it when we achieve it? And so this is the conversation that we've been having over the course of now 5 months. I think there's terrific interest in what we're doing. I do think we have a predilection sometimes to believe that we can focus really on one thing to the exclusion of others. And so part of this is some renorming of our own culture and the way we think about the opportunities and options available to us. That to build research and scholarship at the very highest levels, to grow our ability to impact fields deeply and to help create solutions that improve our world, that doesn't mean that we are any less committed to undergraduate education, and so or our faith commitment, or these other important foundational beliefs we have and commitments. So to some extent, the conversation that I've had, and part of my role, is helping people understand that in fact we can do these things all at the same time, but we need to do so strategically and be focused and disciplined about it, and we need to be able to invest resources in just the right ways. And so we've identified not only some of these changes that we want to implement in order to be able to generate revenue, for example, to do all of these kinds of things, but we're also targeting specific other kinds of support we need. Just yesterday, I think it was, we announced that we have found resources and are beginning to hire several new individuals in research administration to help provide some of the infrastructural support that we need to be able to manage grant activity, to handle complex procurement issues centrally. We're going through systematically identifying the elements of support that we need in order to be able to do that which we're going to do, and to do it smartly and in ways that, in the language of Pro Futurists, remind us of our judicious stewardship.
Great. Other questions? Dr. Livingstone, there's something that you mentioned. Do you have one, Dr. Tatum?
Thank you. Lynn Tatum in the Baylor Interdisciplinary Corps. Chairman Allison and President Livingstone. Back in 1966, your organization, the Association of Governing Boards, your organization, the American Council of Education, and our organization, the American Association of University Professors, published a very important document that our various associations have endorsed, the Statement on Governance of Colleges and Universities, what we call shared governance. When you say that the board is committed to best practices, is this the basic principle outline that we're going to be working, that we can assume we're working with here at Baylor?
From the board's perspective, yes, and that was something that we did talk about at the retreat, was the concept of shared governance, what that means. As you would expect from my world, I was very comfortable with shared governance because we had medical staff, we had boards, we had management, and it was very much effective as shared governance. And I looked to Linda and Michael to help us make sure we're navigating that correctly, and that there is a role for shared governance. I have no problem with that, and I think our board understands it. That's part of the reason we had the outside consultants coming in to work with us. And there was just recently an article in our magazine that came out that we shared with all the board members, was specifically on that, sir, on shared governance. So.
No, I would affirm that, and with every new set of new board members that comes in, there's conversations around shared governance and what that means, because it's not a concept that the average person outside of academics understands at all. And so I think there's a deep commitment to it on the board. I think it's a learning process for folks that aren't used to academics. Certainly Michael and I are committed to working with faculty as we go forward on these important strategic issues for the university.
Well, let me just make a brief statement that AAUP does polls on what works well, and one of the first things that in the polls it says, are your administrators and is your board at least articulating that they approve of shared governance? So let me just say, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tatum. Are there any other questions from? No, we've got. Aren't I here? No, Dr. Driscoll coming with the microphone.
Hi, my name is Abigail Reagan. I'm a student. I don't represent anyone, my family. Dr. Livingstone, this is mainly a question for you, but I would love to hear the board and the interim president's opinion as well. How would you address the opinion that your gender was the determining factor in your presidential hiring, especially in a time of heat with the Baylor public against all of the sexual assault allegations?
Well, Joel, she said, how would I address the opinion that my gender was the determining factor in my hiring?
Let
I
me
would say I
answer
don't
that.
think that's actually true.
Let me answer that.
And he can answer that better than I can, because he was in the decision-making process.
I will tell you this. If I was looking at the qualifications that Dr. Livingstone had, I would have compared that to, I did not go into this thinking one way or the other. I was going to get, from my perspective, I want the best candidate. And if I would not have known the gender of her resume, she had the requirements I was looking for. It was maybe a positive in some respects in people's minds that we selected the first female president for the university, but that was not a factor, and there was not a list of criteria that said we were doing that. I just go on the qualifications and the individual. So if Dr. Livingstone, if that resume would have been a male, that person would have been, in my mind, hired. So it's just, I think that's also a change that we, right now, it's positive. I mean, it's one of those things that turned out. It's like her playing in the Big 12 in the basketball. That was a positive. Wasn't on the list of criteria for it, but it turned out to be something that was very positive for us.
Any other questions? I know we're running a little short on time. Dr. Livingstone, do you have time for one more question? I mean, we're in this renovated Cashion Academic Center. We've walked by the beautiful Foster campus.
Right.
It seems that Baylor, since 2003, has been under constant construction. It's a little quiet right now. Are there any projects that are on the horizon? You had mentioned a little bit about construction.
Well, certainly part of the strategic planning process is going to be looking at prioritizing facilities. And so we have a whole list of kind of renovations or enhancements to existing facilities that could potentially go into the plan. And then we have a whole list of new construction items that could go into the plan. And so so there's a bit of a pause right now as we then build out the strategic plan and say, okay, of all those options, and I would say there's probably on that, if you looked at that whole list all together across everything that's sort of been suggested, it's probably over $800 million worth of facilities, okay? Just facilities. That doesn't count anything else. So you can't do all of that, obviously, in a process over 5 years, maybe potentially over 10 years you could. So one of the things we're doing is going through both those renovation, existing updates, and the new construction, saying how do we have to prioritize those given the academic strategic plan that we're focused on, given our vision and where we want to go, and then laying against that our fundraising capacity and our ability to raise funds for different kinds of things. And so we'll be making some decisions about those. It will be very difficult decisions. Just it'll be difficult to make some choices between some academic priorities. It will be difficult to make choices between facilities priorities. But we believe what we come up with will be tied very directly to our vision, to that academic plan. And again, we'll have a longer term facilities plan that will build out some of those things over longer than 5 years. But that's kind of where we are and why you kind of see a pause in some of the activity on campus.
May I just please go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm after you.
Very important. I want our faculty colleagues to hear this. I know I communicate this with deans and with provost office staff and with ones of you that I see. We've not made firm determinations yet about just what President Livingstone indicated. And there are some really important infrastructural pieces that we need to put into place in order for us to achieve our Tier 1 aims. We talk a lot at senior levels of consultation, consideration, advisement around another form of building, and that's not necessarily just construction, brick and mortar. That's building the human capital and the talent that the university needs to be able to achieve Tier 1. We have a great faculty. You are a great faculty. We need to strengthen you, our faculty, and build human capital. So much of what we have discussed and that which is found in initial drafts of a campaign prospectus that have been shared with some donors and others is that of endowed professorships and endowed chairs and the addition of new faculty lines. And should in fact we proceed in this direction, it would be one of the moments in our history in which we would expect to add strategically, purposefully, human capital, great faculty, and excellence in our academic core that stretches undergraduate, graduate education, to do research and teaching of a kind that we've not done before previously at any given moment in time in the history of the university. And that's what's exciting as well, not only the prospect of building buildings, but the prospect of strengthening and building the faculty that Baylor needs for the century ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing that, and I apologize for comparing my past life with what I'm doing now, but it's kind of like it's hard to give up 45 years of one life there. But in my world before, what we focused on, our mission was around our patients. It was all about the patients, the best for the patients. Here, what's to me is so important, it's our mission around our students. It's the importance of we're all here for the student. And I just want to say how much I appreciate what you as faculty and staff do to support our students, because that's why we're here. And we have a student life committee, for example. And I said to the board last month at our board meeting, I said, if there was one committee I would want every board member to attend, it's the Student Life Committee, because we hear such wonderful stories about our students. We always start our board meeting with a student doing the devotional. And now that my wife moved me to Waco, I get a chance to interact more with students. I am so impressed with the quality of our students. And I always felt we had the best students in the country, but knowing what I'm seeing and having the conversations, we're blessed. And I just think I want to say thank you to the faculty and the staff that we're here for the student, and the board's here for the students. And to me, that's what's most exciting. I challenge anyone that wants to come on this campus who has any questions about our student life in Baylor, I would let them talk to any student across this campus and find out what really happens. You got to come inside and see them and visit with them. And to me, that's what gets me excited about what the future is and the vision and the strategy, because we're doing what's right for our students.
Right. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Dr. Livingstone, Mr. Allison, Dr. McLendon, thank you very much. And thank all of you for being here today. Thank you so much.